So if you watch this video and your experience is a guy called David talking to me about the subject of awakening or non-duality, then you've missed it. Come back to your immediate experience. Come back to the simple sense of presence. If at any point during this video you happen to notice that I'm contradicting myself frequently in language, then recognize that you're in the mind. And again, come back to this immediate sense of present aliveness. And see if you can relax the mind as you listen to this. And see if you can let the message sink to a deeper level, to a level that you just can't think about, but you can feel it. Okay. So I wanted to make this video to point out something about the ways in which this message, if you can call that a message, can be heard. So this channel, this pointing, can easily be taken on conceptually, or can be, let's say, heard from a position of me or a position of mind. What I'm pointing to is prior to all that, is prior to the conceptual understanding, is prior to the thoughts about the way it is or isn't, is prior to the beliefs about anything, the beliefs about awakening. It's prior to or doesn't exist in time. What I'm pointing to isn't a way, isn't a certain way, doesn't have objective qualities, doesn't have a position. Belief isn't required. Because when what I'm pointing to becomes clear, it doesn't need belief. It's self-confirmingly obvious, beyond a doubt, beyond a thought that says anything about it, beyond belief. It is the very substance of, you could say, all the thoughts, all the words, all the language, all the belief, all the doubt. It's prior to or transcends all of that, and isn't dependent on it. How flimsy an awakening this would be if it was dependent on how we described it, how we thought about it, how we defined it. It's not dependent on any of that. So ideally, when listening to these videos, as I always say, I'm not a person talking to another person on the other side of the camera who's hearing this as a conceptual message. Is hearing this in order to understand with the mind. What I'm pointing to is always, or what I'm encouraging is always an exploration of your own immediate experience, which doesn't require thought. The thought's not required at all. Belief isn't required at all. So when you watch these videos, you don't need to think about it. You don't need to think about what I'm saying. You don't need to consider what I'm saying to be true or not true. In fact, I don't believe anything I say on this channel. I don't need to believe it. And nothing I say is true. Nothing I say is needed to understand a truth. There is no truth. So when you listen to this pointing, can you feel what I'm pointing to? Because this becomes a lot more about feeling and a lot less about thought and mind-based or conceptual understanding. Can you feel it? Are you, let's say, connected with it? Is it clear in your experience? So the concepts about it, the words about it, the language, the thoughts, are made of enlightenment, are made of the very substance of awakeness. I'm going to call it awakeness, but obviously it is too free to be defined by an objective term. You can call it whatever you want, it doesn't matter. What you call it doesn't affect it. It not being a thing. What I'm pointing to is you. So if you hear these words and the focus is on the language, the focus is on the description, the focus is on the objective content of the words as a story, as a description. That's not what I'm pointing to. The words are made of it. The sound you're hearing right now is enlightenment. If you stop for a second and wherever you are, if you stop, bring your attention into the physicality of this immediate moment, that's what I'm pointing to. That is enlightenment. Even the thoughts are made of enlightenment, are made of awakeness, are made of aliveness, alive, present, knowingness. That which I'm always pointing to that has no name, are made of it. The substance of the thought is enlightenment itself, is awakeness. The content of the thought as suggested as a story, as suggested as what the thought suggests, as something in time, some way it is, some theme, some story, is not what I'm pointing to. What I'm pointing to is the actual substance of this immediate experience of thought, this immediate experience of thinking. So the nature of thought is non-dual. The nature of thought is timeless, doesn't exist in time. The nature of thought has no separation. The experience of thought, the substance of the thought, has no separation, is non-dual. The content of the thought, if believed, if there's belief in there, if there's, let's say, identification in there, is not what I'm pointing to. The belief, the identification is a non-dual experience. There's no identified entity other than a process that just appears now as a single thought appearing in this moment from nowhere. It's what is suggested in the content of that, what is suggested in the context of that, the subject, the theme of that thought is the illusion. The thought itself is pure awakeness. So it's easy to spot when the words I'm speaking are taken on by the mind, are taken as from a position of me, taken as a conceptual understanding, because people will write to me, people will make comments, and they'll ask me about the way it is or the way it isn't. They want me to define for them how it is and how it's not, or they'll make statements about the way it is and the way it isn't. And sometimes they'll list things, they'll list statements about the way this is the way it is, it's like this, it's not like that. That's a conceptual understanding, that's a mind-based understanding. That's not what I'm pointing to. You get another type of comment which someone will describe their experience. To say some of these practices, someone will describe their experience throughout that period of the practice and describe what their experience has been like. The identification there has thinned to a degree, the identification there has softened. But there's still the suggestion that there is a me and time that this is happening to as an experience. And again, that's not what I'm pointing to. What I'm pointing to is simply this. See if we can get in touch with this in your own experience right now. So bring your attention to the simple sense of being alive now. We're fully present, fully immersed in this immediacy. The sensory experience without the labels, just what's here. See how long it takes for a thought to come up that might describe something about experience. See how long it takes for a thought to come up that might describe something about, that might suggest time and describe something about me and time as I relate to a world, or me and time as I relate to what David's talking about. And if it comes up, that's not what I'm pointing to. Just drop it, just let it go. Come back to this. So if you've tasted this, let's say, I like to use that because it sounds delicious. If you've tasted what I'm talking about, this, which you can't describe, and like I said, you can't take a position on and refer to, when you do, it seems to fade away, it seems to be obscured. You seem to lose it, quote unquote, lose it. But that losing it is just one thought that appears now that suggests time, which then goes on to inform another thought and another thought, creating the illusion of time, creating the illusion of a me here that relates to thinking, that relates to sensing, that relates to a world. Come back to this. If you've tasted what I'm pointing to, if at some level awakeness has recognised itself here in your experience, let's say, then just get in touch with that. The feeling of it, feel it, embody it, be it, because that's what you are anyway. The simple aliveness, simple effortless presence, simply being, inescapably obvious, self-confirming, this is, or I am. Watch for the mind, from no position, embody this completely, feel it, feeling it as it, not separate from it. And then watch for a thought that comes up that suggests, I need to move away from this, I need to move on, figure something out. I need to come back and recollect my information, come back and regroup, so that I can relate to this experience from a position and figure it out. In whatever form that thought might appear, see that's just one thought that appears now. There's no awakening, there's no awake person or identified person. As you're sitting here, I'm not a person over here talking to a person, you over there, about a subject called awakening. This is simply awakeness. You could say talking to itself. Clarifying itself to itself. Seeming to pretend to be a separate thing in a separate world, a separate me in a separate world, by automatically, through habit, with this thought that always pops up now, that always appears as the presence of awakeness, the present aliveness of awakeness, that suggests this experience isn't correct. There will be a better experience in the future. Or says, or doubts, throws up a doubt like, is this awakeness? Is this not awakeness? Am I awake? Am I not awake? There's no you that wakes up. There's no me that wakes up. I'm not someone, like I said in my previous video, who had an awakening in time and then woke up and then is now awake in time. There's no person here to wake up. The awakening is just the awakening is inherently this, always, infinitely without time, infinitely transcendent of time. There's an apparition that suggests that this isn't awakeness, that suggests I am a me that is either awake or not awake. That's the illusion. See, the illusion isn't in a timeline, it's not real, it's not a real thing. It's one thought that appears now. Is the seeming obscuration. So then come back to this, which I'm saying is enlightenment. There's nothing but enlightenment. There's nothing but non-dual. There isn't a separate experiencer and an experience. There's just experience, which is inherently perfect, which is inherently complete, which is inherently peaceful and self-confirming. But it's self-confirming because it doesn't have to confirm itself to a person. It doesn't have to confirm itself to an entity that's full of doubt that has to decipher what this is. It doesn't matter. It's too simple for that. It's before all that. It transcends all that. It's just this, the way it is, anyway. Before the seeming person in time is created, or born from this awakeness into time, in this moment right now. So it's always coming back to this, inherently perfect, inherently peaceful, inherently okay, inherently made of love. The very essence of okayness, the very essence of perfection is this. And the good news is that might appear as a doubt thought, that might appear as an uneasiness, that might appear as confusion. But the good news is that doesn't matter because this is too perfect to be tarnished by something that doesn't exist, like an illusion. This appearance, this existence. It's too free to be a certain way, to be this way or that way. It's too free to be bound by time, to be bound by thought. The illusion doesn't touch it, because the illusion isn't real. What is real? What never comes and never goes. The thoughts will come and go, they seem to. The story will change. For a lot of you, that feeling of me will come and go. The thoughts come and go, these words come and go. What is always here? Regardless of the story that appears within it that seems to obscure it, what is always here? What is never not here? This isn't something that you can find. It's too close for that. This isn't something that you can discover. It's something that's revealed. It's not a thing. To inherently be the way it is anyway, to inherently have always been here. It's that of you which has always been here. It's that of you which isn't dependent on thought objects or descriptions or concepts or understanding, because it's already understood. You ask yourself, am I hearing this from a position? What is my position on this? Because what I'm pointing to has no positions. Or it is all positions. It's too free to need to take a position. So where am I hearing this from? Am I hearing this as a concept? How do I know I'm hearing it conceptually? Because you think about it. You don't need to think about this. It's not dependent on thought. You don't need to try and figure it out. You don't need to get it, because you never will from that position. From a position in time, you will never get this. It never happens, because it's already happened. It already is the case. It's a stopping. It's a not adding to. It's not moving forward. It's a not taking the action that we feel we need to initially with thought, belief. Not taking that action, just stop. And eventually action happens without the one at the centre of it. Thinking happens with no thinker. Sound hears itself. The world, awakeness, sees itself. There can be doing, there can be action without the doer or the character at the centre of it, who has this tension that feels like it constantly needs to figure things out, that it constantly needs to protect itself, that it constantly needs to understand to give itself some stability. Where is that? Where are you? What feels like you right now? And do you need to think to be that? Do you need to become more yourself in the future when you wake up? Or if you've had an awakening, have you lost yourself? See, these are just suggested in the one thought that appears now. So again, we come back to this. We always come back to here and get familiar with that function of pulling back from experience. Because what's left when the mind has no suggested reality, when there's no belief left in what the mind suggests as the way it is or the way it isn't, is the senses without the label: seeing, feeling, hearing, tasting, touching. Just the senses, just this appearance, just this sound. That's when you lose yourself completely. When there's nothing at the centre of that gathering at all, relating to it all, trying to figure it all out, trying to find the better this. This is the only this. Nothing's separate. So that's why when I engage with people, all I recognize is awakeness. All I recognize is myself without the identity. What I see is a process appearing now in thought that seems to suggest that is a person, or I am a person, or you are a person, or that is not awake, that has this identification. But there's no identified person that exists, there's just the thought. It's just a thought that's happening now, that's all there is to it. But it's all about feeling. Once you feel that, once what I'm pointing to becomes, let's say, is revealed clearly in experience, and it starts off quite elusive, and then it just grows and grows and grows, comes more and more into the forefront of experience, is less and less separated up by periods in time, or characters, or theories, or beliefs. It just begins to engulf this position, physically and psychologically, which end up being the same thing, until all there is left is the appearance. with nothing in it but itself, with no one here to relate to it, with no one here to resist it, with no one here to oppose it or experience it or try and figure it out. There's only experience, no experiencer. There's only non-dual, and its nature is peace. But not the peace that the mind would project into the future as an attainment. Anyway, that'll do for now, and I'll talk to you next time.